France officially entered the Second World War 2 days after Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939. But neither France nor Britain came to the rescue of their Polish ally, and 2 weeks later, the Soviet Union invaded Poland from the east. Unable to resist, the Polish army escaped to France. The pilots ended up just next to Lyon in the town of Bron, where Trinity Church was based for 2 years. But France itself was invaded in May 1940, and by the end of June, it too was conquered. The Germans split the country into 2 parts. Lyon was in the so-called Free Zone under the control of the Vichy government. So what happened to Trinity Church during World War II? I asked our chaplain, Ben Harding. So we're here again with Ben Harding, our chaplain. And Ben, I was wondering if you could tell us, do you know what happened to Trinity Church in 1940 when the Germans arrived?
The short answer is yes and no. The real answer is I'd love to find out more, and so in a sense this is a request for help. If anybody knows any more details about this and can fill in some of the gaps. One of the cool things we've got is we know that Trinity Church existed, that there was a building here on the Quai de Serbie, where the church had been for a number of years up to that point. We know that we've got some documents here that explain what happened immediately as the Germans were arriving, as the Nazis were arriving. But then we've also got some documents that show us that services started right after the war. So we know the big picture. We know that the church shut. We don't really know a lot about who the people were that were involved and what actually happened during the occupation.
Can you read a little bit from some of those documents just to give us a flavor of what people were feeling like at that time?
Yes. One of my favourites is a letter that was sent from a Mr. Lundrum Esquire, and it's dated the 23rd of July 1940. And the heading, the beginning of the letter says, "Having escaped from Lyon at the last moment, I would like to inform you that I delegate any powers I had as chairman of the committee to the above," etc., etc. But there's this instance at the beginning of the letter where he says, "I was there and I've escaped, and it was at the last minute." And so there's a clear, as you look over the documents, there's a clear, almost a locking of the building, squaring away of the finances, and an evident departure, certainly for the British who were there, as they went back to the UK. We've got a cash statement for 1940, and it shows various different elements that went on. There were normal things like the stipend that was paid to Reverend Jones. There were repairs of church fabric. There were subscriptions to the church magazine. I'd love to find a copy of the 1939-1940 church magazine. But then it says at the bottom, owing to circumstances, no services were held in the church during the year, the building being closed. It says somewhere else that they've paid on for the church to be kept by a concierge who's taking care of the church, and in a sense that's where the story dries up. We know that the church was put under mothballs, really, and it was locked up, and then it was opened again, and we start finding documents again in 1947.
So if anybody knows anything about the history of Trinity Church, you're asking them to contact you, and maybe we could piece together some more parts of the puzzle. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to know some of the characters that were involved. I know that Lyon obviously was a very important political location, and that there were powers, both ally and other, that kind of swept in and swept out of Lyon. I'd love to find out more about the personal stories of what it was like to be a member of Lyon Anglican Church, Trinity Church here during the war, during the occupation. Because I know for a lot of families it was very complicated. There might have been French people who were married to UK citizens, etc., etc. So I'd love to find out more about the people and the situation at that time. So if you do know some more, let us know. That'd be brilliant.
And speaking of these people, you met somebody who was very near to the new premises we're going to be using right at that time. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah. So I took a funeral yesterday, and the gentleman who'd helped me coordinate the service asked about our community and said, where do we meet, and what's our journey been? And I said, well, we're going to soon be in our new location Rue Boncel in the 7th arrondissement. And he said, oh, I know that church really well, that place really well. He said, I was baptised in the Catholic church opposite in 1947, and I was the first person to be baptised in that place after the war. So it appears that the whole area was levelled and was rebuilt. And so our new building and the building that this gentleman was baptised in were reconstructed straight after the war, and this is where he was baptised, yeah.
So you say the whole area was leveled. Now, was it the Germans who leveled the area?
Unfortunately not. It was a mildly uncomfortable conversation I had with this gentleman, because he said it was actually the British and the Americans that had levelled the whole area, because there were a lot of marshalling yards there. There's also the fabrication of military hardware that was going on just around that corner. So it was an industrial area that was serving the Nazis at the time well. And so the British, the American bombers levelled it, and unfortunately there was a loss of life there too. And so there's this bitter sweet feeling as we think about the liberation. As I'm living in France, I realise that it's much, much more nuanced and much more painful and much more complicated than we were taught at school, and certainly that you see on any films.